Laura was about to turn 18. Her whole big family was getting ready for this event. And the family was really big. She had 9 older brothers and sisters. Some had already moved out of their parents' house, and some were still living at their parents' house. But for the holiday, they decided to gather as a family, because she was the last one to transition into adulthood. But you couldn't call this family too friendly, and Laura's life wasn't fabulous. Her father had a big problem with alcohol, and he had been drinking all her conscious life, and sometimes he would pounce on his family with his fists. Sober he was more balanced, but he was rarely sober. And, of course, there would be alcohol at Laura's birthday party, which her father would by no means refuse. But, surprisingly, the party went more or less peacefully. Father did not rage, and as soon as he drank enough alcohol, Mother took him to bed in his room. The rest of the evening passed merrily. The relatives joked, laughed, and played games. Some played Monopoly and some played cards nearby. No one left that night, and everyone stayed the night at the house. Since the family was rich, there were enough rooms for every member of the family. Laura walked happily into her room and collapsed on her bed. Everyone was drinking tonight except her. Laura was the most obedient and decent girl in the family. Maybe because she was the youngest and so she got more attention. One could not say definitively. But she was strictly law-abiding and didn't even look at alcohol until she was 21. Even though her brother tried to give her a glass with the words that no one would know and one glass wouldn't change anything, the girl still refused. And she didn't regret it one bit, because she was having a lot of fun checking out the day and without a drink. Laura changed into her pajamas and went to bed satisfied and tired. In the middle of the night she thought she heard some rustling in her room. Turning on her back and opening her eyes, she saw her father standing over her with a knife in his hands. It seemed as if he wanted to stab her in the body, but at the same time he held himself back. Laura was scared and looked at her father in shock. At one point he asked her to run, but she didn't move. Then he yelled even louder at her and she immediately came to her senses. She quickly got out of bed and ran down the hallway calling for her family. On the way, the girl looked into the first room, her mother's room. And she screamed. She saw her mother lying in bed with her throat cut. Behind her she heard her father's footsteps and ran further down the corridor. She continued calling for the others, but soon realized it was no use. Peering into the open rooms, she saw the corpses of her brothers and sisters. The girl ran out into the street with all her speed and ran to her neighbors for help. They called the police and an ambulance. The man was taken away, and then the bodies were taken away. The police interviewed Laura and tried to find out how she had survived. The girl responded that she didn't know, she just woke up in time. She also told the officer that her father had asked her to run away and it didn't seem like a mockery. She felt as if there were tears on his face at the time. She was told that the house would be sealed off for a while and the girl would be better off living elsewhere. Laura unconditionally agreed. She could not go home now. She decided to rent a hotel and stay there for a while. She did not even take her belongings out of the house, but asked the police to give her her purse. She had enough money to buy all she needed. As it turned out later, a powerful sleeping pills was found in the blood of the victims, which had been spiked with alcohol, which is why Laura managed to escape, because she was the only one who had not been drinking. 6 months later, the girl still decided to return to her house, having first called a cleaning service to make sure everything was clean when she arrived. By then, her father had been transferred from prison to a mental institution. The reason being that the man had tried to commit suicide there several times. Laura hated her father and was afraid to see him. But she decided for herself that she needed to find out why he did it. After all, it did not happen in a binge. Her father slipped sleeping pills into the alcohol, so the murder was planned. She got over herself, went to the hospital to see her father and asked to see him. She sat in the hall at a table near the window and waited. Her father was brought to her in a straitjacket and told that he was not himself and could sometimes talk nonsense. The girl thanked the orderlies and was left alone with the man. Before she could ask anything, her father told her that he wanted to save her. These words made no sense to her. She demanded an explanation as to why he did all this, why he planned to kill his own family, and why he tried to kill himself. The man said the Babadook made him do it. For 15 years he stalked him and forced him to brutally kill his family. Sober, he couldn't fight him and could cripple his children and wife, so he started drinking. The man reasoned that while he was drinking he was weaker mentally, he was also weaker physically. So even if he had listened to the Babadook, he would have been unable to do anything, unable even to get up. Yes, sometimes he would raise his hand against his family, but no more. Laura was confused. She didn't know who her father was talking about. She could see that he had lost his mind. But she could not understand whether he had been that crazy to begin with or whether what had happened had aggravated his condition. The man continued his story. He said that in the end he was just tired of fighting the Babadook. The voices in his head made her father go crazy. So he decided to get it over with. He knew that sooner or later the creature would take over and his family would die in agony. So he slipped a powerful sleeping pill into everyone's drink. It was a nuclear mixture and it was the only thing that could kill a person. And if there were those who could survive it, they slept soundly and felt no pain. Death was quick and painless. And he did not drink, but only pretended to be drunk. He said it was a surprise to him to see Laura wake up just seconds before he would plunge the knife into her body. So he begged her to run away because the Babadook would make him kill his daughter anyway. After that, he started whispering that it was his fault for not giving him 15 years ago what he should have and that he didn't want to kill him. He began to say, "My fault," louder and faster that all his words merged into an incomprehensible set of sounds. Then the orderlies came into view abruptly and dragged the father back to the room. Laura took a cab and drove home. She wished she had time to say something to her father, though what was the point if he was completely insane? She was ready to hear everything, but not this nonsense. As she approached the house, she met a neighbor. Old Lady Sandy, who was a frequent visitor to her family. Laura approached her and asked how she was doing. The old lady ignored the question and hugged the girl. She sensed her grief and told her that after Corey's death her father had gone completely insane. Laura frowned and asked the neighbor who Corey was. She was surprised that the girl didn't know. Then the old woman volunteered to tell Laura about it, because there was no point in hiding anymore. It turned out that in their large family originally there were not 10 children, but 11. Corey was her older brother, a bit of an oddball and hyperactive. He liked to wear a floor-length cape and a long top hat to make him look grown up. It all happened 15 years ago, when the girl was only 3 years old. Then her brother changed a lot. The boy loved to be the center of attention, but his parents couldn't give him that. They worked hard, and if they had free time, they couldn't find time for one boy when they had 10 other children. At first Corey was offended by this, and then he became angry. The boy started pestering the boys with new pranks. He would run up to the door, knock exactly 3 times, and when the door opened, he would run away. That's why the neighborhood nicknamed him Babadook, after his 3 knocks. Corey really liked that, and when he knocked on the door, he started saying, "Baba, Dook, Dook, Dook." But then he went even further. His friends would come back from their outings bruised and scratched. When parents asked what happened, the children said they were playing with the Babadook. They played games of walk on broken glass with your bare feet or dodgeball with stones. This was the last straw for those around him and for his parents. The father began to whip the Corey with a belt, and the neighbors fenced off their children from the boy in every way. And then the games became even more violent, and it was impossible to get out of them alive. All the boys who continued to play with the Babadook began to die one by one. When one was found suffocated with a bag over his head, the Babadook replied that they were playing a game of who would last the longest without air, and his friend lost. The old lady said she didn't know how fate turned out, but Corey's body was found hanging on a rope in his room. His father said the boy had committed suicide. No one bothered to look into it, because everyone was just glad. But after that, the head of the family started drinking a lot of alcohol, which is why the girl remembered her father as an alcoholic, although before that he drank very rarely, only on holidays. Apparently, he just could not get over the death of his son. With these words, the old woman sighed and went back into the house. Laura might have wanted to ask her something, but she felt devastated inside. In an instant, her whole life just turned upside down. It was hard for the girl to process it all, but it made sense to her why no one was talking about the fact that there was another child. Laura went into the house and looked around. Going around the room, she saw that everything was clean. There was no trace of blood. The cleaners had done their job well. It was the first night she had been alone in such a big house, and the flashbacks from that terrible night made her heart cringe with fear. That night she stayed to sleep in her room, for it was the only room in which no one had died. For the night, Laura decided to leave a small nightlight on so that it would be less scary to sleep. Late that night, the girl woke up abruptly. She thought someone was looking at her, but when she looked around she saw no one. It took her literally 5 seconds to realize that the night light was off. Could it be that the lights were out? But even if it was, there was a generator in the house. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door.